Good afternoon. Hope everyone had a happy and safe Thanksgiving. Today I'm going to be doing a review on this Harbor Freight blasting pig. This is something that I bought last year. I was in a pinch. I needed to sandblast something, and it was cheap, and I could walk into a store and buy it that day. So
Before we get into the actual review, I just want to go over some safety things. I got all my PPE from Home Depot. This is the list. If you want to pause now, it'd be a good time. These 3M goggles are the best ones I've found for sandblasting. They keep a lot of the grit out and they don't really fog up that badly. Also by 3M, I'm unboxing my respirator. I wear this underneath a sock. You're going to want to make sure you keep the bag so you can put all your stuff back in it after you clean it. Helps to keep grit from the shop and dust and stuff from getting into it. When you're putting these filter cartridges together, you want to make sure you put them together the right way. Your primary filter pad to keep all the big stuff out, and then your finer filter pad, which is a cartridge to keep all the fine stuff out, and make sure that whatever filter you're using is NIOSH approved. Right there, NIOSH. There definitely exists better safety equipment than this for sandblasting, but I'm trying to do this on a budget. I don't have a massive blasting unit that spits out a lot of debris, so I'm just trying to get as little inhalation as possible and just protect my senses. Today I'm going to be using the fine coal dust from Tractor Supply. Personally, I like the silicate sand better. I think it takes off more material with this blaster. You'll see here I had a total failure of the inlet hose. This happens pretty regularly where it has to be trimmed just from the grit running against it.
So we've talked about PPE, we've talked about the different grit that I'm using. Now it comes down to time to talk about the actual unit itself. The bits and pieces I've had to replace because they just weren't very good out of the box. The actual canister itself is very good. The canister itself has held up really well. The welds on the tank look good. The manufacturer of the tank itself looks pretty good. It's held up well. I've left it outside a couple of times so you can see a little bit of rust forming on the inside of the handle, but overall that's probably just because it got hit with some grit. The coating quality on the tank is good. It did come with, the kit came with some Teflon tape so you can seal up the connections. These tubes here, a lot of them, the threading quality is pretty poor. They don't fit real well, so you have to use a lot of tape to get it to seal. And over time that tape starts to fail, and you can probably hear in the video when I'm first starting up, there's a lot of leaks. So I'm losing some pressure that could be going, out the end of the nozzle through the leaking systems. But overall, not terrible. Build quality, I mean, compared to, a similar unit from like, say, Tractor Supply or Home Depot or any of those kind of places, build quality is going to be a little bit better. I'm reasonably impressed that of all things, I haven't had to replace this O-ring yet. The actual O-ring that seals the inlet. I have not had to replace this O-ring yet, and I'm fairly impressed by that because I've used other units before that this O-ring, get that out of the way, this O-ring here fails pretty early on because when you're pouring your grit in, a little bit of grit gets on that O-ring, and then when you snug it down, that grit wears into the O-ring and it cuts it. There's quite a bit of grit in there right now, and this O-ring hasn't failed yet. So I'm impressed by that. The thread quality on this is actually pretty good. This threads on there pretty nicely. The thread starts easy, and it threads on there, which is nice for when you're all geared up and you're trying to do this and you can barely see as it is, and your senses are all a little bit dumbed down because they're being protected from the work you're doing. So I like that this is easy to fill. You are going to want to get yourself a large funnel because pouring these bags of grit into that opening is just about nearly impossible without spilling grit all over the place. You don't want to waste any of the grit because it is fairly expensive. So a cheap, big funnel. I think I actually bought this at Harbor Freight when I bought this. I think it was like 10 or 15 bucks. So this is a good investment. Definitely get yourself a big funnel. I've had to replace so far the water separator, a couple of these tubes, some of these fittings here I had to replace. I don't think it came with the air chuck here. I don't think it came with that when I bought it. I had to put one of those on it. The feet are just held on with a little pin, which, I mean, I don't see why that's a problem. I'm fine with that. It doesn't need to be like some kind of welded thing. I know that they do this so they can ship them cheaper. It all makes sense. This hasn't failed yet, which I'm impressed by because there's a lot of abuse going on in this part. This valve hasn't failed, which I'm impressed by. This valve throttles your sand outlet, the amount of sand that actually comes out of the unit. I found it a pretty good practice to just leave that alone. Set it at like a 45 and don't touch it, because too much sand coming out of this will make the nozzle puke. And what that means is it'll just kind of launch sand at your part and not really do the abrasive part of it. The part that creates the abrasiveness that you want is the velocity of the sand hitting the material and scraping a little bit of that stuff you don't want on there away, whether it's rust, paint, mill scale, whatever. So you really want a good velocity of sand coming out, but you don't want so much velocity of sand that it pushes back up into the tank and doesn't allow the sand to enter the airstream. So about a 45 seems to be a pretty good angle. One of the things that I don't like about this unit is that there is no real option to upgrade from Harbor Freight with this tank. Like you can't get a bigger hose, you can't get bigger components because everything's locked into a specific size. So really you can only run fine grit through this. If you try to run like a coarse grit, you will not succeed. Excuse me, it will clog in the valve, it'll clog in the tip, it'll clog in the line, and you'll get, 3 or 4 granules out at a time, and that's it. And it really is not effective. So you're really kind of limited to the fine silicates and the fine coal dust, which is great if you're doing like body work, sheet metal work, a little bit of rust removal, a little bit of paint removal, but it's not fast. It does a really clean job. You get a really good finish, but it's not fast. So that's another thing I'm not super fond of, is the inability to run multiple grit sizes in the same unit. That being said, on the counter to that, it is incredibly cheap. Again, I think this unit was like $170, and I've probably run 800-900 pounds of grit through it. And aside from the small problems, like the valves, the connections, the hose, the cheap hardware coming off of it, the loose fittings, that kind of stuff, overall, I've been reasonably happy with it, especially given what I spent on it. So would I recommend this machine to another fab shop? If they're doing something like this where they just need to clean up where they need to weld, or they just need to clean a little bit of rust off so they can see what the problem is, or you're trying to put a finish on something, it's a fine unit. It'll work great for you. Would I recommend this to someone trying to do this entire truck with it? Absolutely not. This thing will take you forever. I like the fact that I can get into tight spaces with this small nozzle. Don't like the fact that when I want to do a big space, it takes a long time and burns through a lot of grit. Overall, the functionality, the convenience of being able to walk into a store and buy it, the cost, all those things considered, I'd probably give this an 8 out of 10 for what I use it for. So that's been the review of the Harbor Freight. I believe this is the 30-pound blasting pig. Thanks for watching.